Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, which is the Global Legislative Framework for Advertising Claims. Just so you know, this webinar is being recorded and I'll be sending the recording to everyone after the webinar. And I will also send a short video clip that's on YouTube, which kind of summarizes a lot of the context of today's webinar as kind of a handy go-to short clip. There's going to be a question and answer kind of time at the end as well. So if you've got any questions as we go through it, please feel free to make a note of those and I'll be able to answer those at the end. So today's webinar is basically, it's about the global legislative framework. I know a few of you have come and see my other webinars, which have been really kind of territory specific. The idea of this webinar is just to give you a real big overview and start thinking about what the law is when it comes to advertising claims and who you need to be aware of, and basically signpost you to who the organisations are, what they do, how they operate, just so when you start thinking about your kind of global network and your global advertising, you can start thinking about who you should be looking out for. I talk about it a lot as well. The kind of way we are at the moment, a lot of our sales are going into e-commerce, they're online, which means that most brands that weren't global are kind of global. It gives you a really good opportunity when you're online to be able to sell anywhere in the world, basically. So I know there are some people that might have a market that's been quite restricted. It might have been UK only, USA only, and now you're looking at those global sales. So it's really important to start thinking, does my evidence that I have for my claims and the claims that I have, are they compliant in those global territories? You might have evidence to substantiate your claims in the territory you're currently selling it in, but you might not have any evidence that satisfies the advertising standards in the other territories you're selling in. So it's really important just to start thinking about it, start thinking about the globe basically. Those international sales. So as I said, I'll be looking at those advertising standard organizations. I obviously won't look at every single one across the globe, but I will be giving you an idea of where you can find the right organizations that you should be aware of. The general legislation surrounding advertising claims, challenges of advertising. I'll give you some examples of legal and withdrawn adverts, methods of claims substantiation. We'll look at some case studies, which will go through the appropriate study design and methodology and how you then submit that evidence. So again, I'll be trying to keep things really broad, not go territory specific, and just give you an idea overall of how you should be looking at your advertising claims worldwide. So to introduce myself, for those that you haven't met me, I'm the regulatory specialist for ATIN Global Research. Basically, it means that I'm on top of all the regulations which apply to our industry in terms of advertising standards and research. I also find myself learning a lot about regulations within fast-moving consumer goods, mainly cosmetics and personal care, because that's where you see the most advertising claims. It's where we conduct the most studies because, yeah, they're the most claims made that need to be substantiated. So I kind of keep on top of every kind of regulation that we're involved in, and then really to help our clients as well. It's really important that I can provide as much advice as possible when you're coming to launch your product and get things like your pack copy approved and things like that. So I started off as a study manager, understood the way that studies should be designed to sort of support consumer claims, went into training and found that, the training that I am most needed for is regulation. So I decided to keep that as a specialism. My main kind of job role really is to provide a gap analysis and a consultancy for our clients. So if you've got any products that you're looking to launch and you want to know what evidence do you need to substantiate your claims, or if you have products on the market and you're not sure if they are compliant in all the territories that you're selling in, my job is very much to tell you how you can make it compliant. So always feel free to get in touch with me if you've got any questions about regulation or any of your advertising claims. So to give an overview, I want to look at the Fmcg market. As mentioned, that's where we've got our advertising claims generally. Like I said, most of it that we do is going to be around cosmetics and personal care, but obviously all FMCG that has claims will need substantiation. So I kind of want to give you an overall picture of that. So the global FMCG market is huge. It's billions and billions of dollars worth. It's always growing. As mentioned, the personal care segment is probably the most substantial growth. This is generally because even globally, worldwide, generally people are getting more disposable income and they want to spend the most of their money on themselves. Things like personal care, cosmetics, is, you know, all about that treating yourself kind of thing. So it's like I said, it's where you see the most claims generally, but also it's where most people are kind of targeting their product manufacturing. There is just a huge market for personal care and cosmetics. I think most of you involved in that industry, you know, the competition is huge, but there's great opportunities there as well. Asia Pacific has got the largest market share when it comes to FMCG, as well as closely followed by North America. So again, thinking about the globe, if you're currently selling in the EU, maybe you want to be targeting places in Asia Pacific and North America, because that is where you've got the largest amount of people consuming fast-moving consumer products. So yeah, it's kind of giving you a signpost there again to say these are the kind of massive markets, and I very much encourage you to get involved. The impact of COVID-19 on FMCG, as I always mention in these webinars, we cannot ignore it at the moment, although things are certainly improving and it's really positive to see. But again, I really want to talk about if there's been kind of an effect of COVID on FMCG. So there has been an impact. It's impacted over 195 countries across the globe. So it's basically social distancing has really been the thing that's affected the FMCG market. As mentioned, everything's going online, but it means that there's less consumption still, because you're not kind of browsing around shops, you're not going shopping for fun. It's kind of reduced it. When I did my webinar last week, which was about online sales, in terms of the cosmetics personal care market, only 10% of the sales generally made were online. So we think that's 90% of the sales that we're not able to make because people aren't able to go into store. So although obviously it's gone up from that 10% since COVID, it does show that that's kind of a huge percentage of, you know, people shopping that's really missing. So things are changing, as mentioned, though. We're knowing that shops are opening over in the UK here. We've got some shops opening up, like the non-essential shops, clothes shops, things like that are all opening up again. So we may find that this starts to pick back up. So people have been stockpiling food and water, so there has also been that as well. So we've found things like, as you know, there's been shortages on antibacterial hand wash, wipes, disinfectant. So all of that part of the FMCG market has really blossomed. So if you're involved in that market, it's obviously been really good for you. Consumer packaged goods as well is kind of seen a huge growth, because obviously people don't want to have things that aren't packaged as much anymore. So there's been growth there as well. I'm saying it's not all doom and gloom. Some industries have seen a lot of growth from the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's kind of the overview of, you know, what is the whole market, what are we looking at, what we're making advertising about. Now I want to give you an overview of self-regulation, advertising self-regulation. It's basically the most common way that advertising is regulated in most countries. So again, to give you that kind of global overview, basically the ad self-regulation is basically organizations that provide a platform for people to complain about products, and then they investigate those complaints for the misleading adverts to do things like find your evidence. And then basically if you haven't got the evidence you say you need, or your ad is in any way misleading or offensive, it's taken down. The idea is we're ensuring that advertisements are legal, decent, honest, and truthful. There are three parts of the industry. So you've got the advertisers who are paying for the advertising agencies that are responsible for its form and content, and the media that carry it. All of these platforms are involved in advertising, and it's really important to be aware that all of these platforms, all of these parts of the industry should be aware that the adverts they are either displaying or making follow those regulations, that they're legal, decent, honest, and truthful. This very much includes having evidence to substantiate your claims. So again, that's what we're going to be looking at a lot today. So, like I said, it's where people can complain. So if you've got a consumer or a competitor that sees your advertising claims and thinks that they are in any way untruthful or misleading, they will complain to those advertising self-regulatory organizations and make sure that there's something investigated about those adverts that are out there. So it's really important to be aware that, like I said, it's not just your consumer that's looking at products, it's your competitors as well. So that's why you should really think about the evidence that you're holding, because obviously if you're making these amazing claims about your product, your competitors may think, well, I haven't been able to make that claim. I know I can't make that claim because I haven't been able to get the evidence about it. So I don't think they've got the evidence either. And that's generally the main reason that adverts are complained about. Consumers are more savvy these days, though. I think it's something that we talk about a lot in the industry, where there's this kind of different consumer out there now, where people really care about the product. Is it truthful? What's the story of the brand? Are they ethical? And I think it means that consumers kind of step back a bit now and think about whether or not these products are truthful and the claims you're making about them are truthful. So again, there's a kind of a bit of a change in the industry over the last couple of years, where people are finding that there's more complaints coming in about their products. More people have had to take down their adverts because they haven't had evidence. It's really important to know to be safe and confident that your adverts do have evidence behind them and the claims are truthful. So the ICC, I just want to bring them up, the International Chamber of Commerce, they've got a framework for self-regulatory organisations to adopt, which is to do with self-regulation. That's used in 52 countries worldwide at the moment, and it's an important place to look at, basically, if you're thinking about launching into a country. It's a good place to start and see who has adopted their framework. If they have adopted their framework, you know that, say, if you're looking at 3 markets that have all adopted the ICC's framework, you are probably going to be looking at the same code of conduct for those advertising claims. So it's a really good place to start and get an idea, get a feel for the similarities in the countries that you're looking at launching your product into in terms of the regulations there. Because, you know, the easiest thing you can do is get the evidence that you need in one study, probably cross territory again. So you might have sort of participants within USA, UK, Asia, Australia, whatever your markets are, but the study can be conducted at once. You can have one overall report for your evidence, as well as having it broken down into countries. And this means that you can, so you can kind of check on the framework there and check to see if the study that you're conducting is compliant for those advertising claims you're making in all of those territories. It makes life a lot easier. Instead of thinking it country by country, you can kind of get that evidence all at once. There's also the International Council of Advertising Self-Regulation, or ICAS. Now, they were set up by the European Advertising Standards Alliance. So obviously in the EU, you've got all your separate SROs for your countries, but you've also got the EASA, which are the overall SRO for Europe. And they set up ICAS, which has basically invited other countries to come and join that as well. And it means, again, that they're all following the same code of conduct. There's a lot more information on the ICAS website. As mentioned, the ICC is really just a framework, whereas ICAS is a lot more information. It gives you news updates about advertising self-regulation, and you can see all of the members that are in there in their council worldwide. So again, if you're thinking about advertising sort of in a few different countries, look on the ICAS website first, because it'll give you an idea of who is following the same code of conduct. And obviously if there's any updates on there, you'll know which countries that you're kind of applicable to, are those updates are happening. So there's a lot of information on this slide, I know, but I just want to give you an overview. Like I said, it's hard to kind of go too granular when I'm talking about global ad self-regulation, but I just want to give you an idea of where to start looking if you haven't already, or if you're thinking of starting to advertise globally, so your products more globally, you can get an idea on there of where you need to be looking to find out those regulations. Again, you can always feel free to ask us. As mentioned about doing kind of cross-territory studies, we're completely global. We're able to do those for you. We're able to support you. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, actually. I won't get too distracted. So what are the different global advertising standards? So again, that's kind of the signpost. As I said, not too granular, but I want to give you some examples to put into context. Who are the advertising SROs that I'm talking about? So All part of ICAS, by the way. You've got UK, India, Australia, and Brazil. So we know that they're following the same code of conduct as mentioned. Just wanted to pick up some examples that were from different places around the globe, just to give you an idea. So because they're all part of ICAS, we know they're all following a really similar code of conduct. And part of that code of conduct, which is really important, is that you need to have evidence behind all of your claims, and you need to be able to present that evidence with no delay if you're ever called upon it by those SROs to show your evidence for your claim substantiation, should your claims be challenged. So it's very important to keep that in mind, basically most global territories, but definitely any that are part of ICAS. The FTC is slightly different in the USA, so I wanted to bring those up. So basically, they're a federal organization. They're not a self-regulatory organization. So this means that they basically are going off law rather than kind of advice. There are advertising laws as well, and I'll talk about those in a minute. And they can police the industry. So they do deal with complaints as well. So obviously you can complain to the FTC, but they are also looking at policing the industry in a way that other SROs don't. So they will look at, they'll kind of keep an eye on the industry and see what adverts are being put out there. They also, I mean, there's harsher penalties out there. They're able to gather complaints from consumers who have complained about your product and build a lawsuit against you. So you could get sued in the USA if you have misleading adverts. So it's kind of that extra thing to be concerned about. Probably can happen in any country, but obviously in the USA, we know there is quite a lawsuit. I can't really think of the word, but it's quite common over there, basically, for people to look at making lawsuits rather than just a complaint basis. And they can do that through the FTC. So very important to keep aware of, basically. I also want to talk about advertising laws, as mentioned. So you've got advertising self-regulatory organizations. Some countries also have federal organizations which are looking at advertising regulation. But every single country, whether or not they have an organization who is actively dealing with complaints and looking at your adverts, there are still laws in place, basically to protect consumers and kind of give general advice. So it's really important to know about the laws as well, because obviously if you offend an advertising law, not only is your advert just going to be withdrawn, it's now illegal and you're going to find much harsher penalties. So I wanted to bring up some of those examples so you can see what I'm talking about. So in the UAE, you've got the National Media Council, which is, again, this is a federal agency. So there's lots of different federal laws about advertising. I've put an example in there for the law regarding printed matters and publications, because again, that'll be any adverts that are on your pack copy, on your labeling of your products, as well as any printed media that you have your adverts in. But obviously there's lots of different federal laws there that are all to do with advertising. So I would really recommend looking at the National Media Council's website and seeing what the laws are that they're enforcing, because again, they've got much harsher penalties if you break those laws. It doesn't mean there's not an SRO, because in the UAE particularly, they have a self-regulatory organization as well, which is called the Advertising Business Group, or the ABG. So they work with the National Media Council. And so the National Media Council are the ones that kind of enforcing it, but there is also a code of conduct on the ABG's website. So I like to bring up the UAE because, like I said, there's just a lot to be aware of if you're thinking of advertising there. Once you're aware of it, it doesn't matter because you can make sure your evidence is there. But it's really making sure that you're aware in the first place if you're not already. In the USA, you've also got the FDA, who create laws to protect consumers, which may be about advertising, as well as other kind of things like products, making sure that there's sort of safe ingredients in products and things like that. So you've also got the FDA, who work closely with the FTC. So again, really important to be aware of. And in China, you've got the advertising law of the People's Republic of China. And that was strengthened in 2015 to ensure that there's tougher rules on advertisers. So be really aware of what's happening in China. If you have evidence about your claims before 2015 in China, have a little look and check the law and make sure that they are still compliant with any changes to the law there. So yes, lots to be aware of. As mentioned, I just wanted to give you an overview, so where to be looking. So I know it's a lot of information, as mentioned, because it's quite global what we're talking about today. So hopefully I'm giving you guys an idea of just where to start looking if you haven't already, or if you know, not necessarily where to start looking, if you've been looking already, maybe help guide your kind of your research there. Again, I want to talk about COVID-19. So all of these different organizations, like I said, ICAS, who are global, the EASA, who are in Europe, the FDA and the FTC, who work together in the USA, CONARED, which is to do with the different SROs that are in South America. They're basically putting out a kind of warning to any advertiser during COVID-19. The idea is to say that just because it's COVID-19 doesn't mean that the rules don't apply. Be really aware of the code of conduct. The laws and standards completely exist, and you need to respect those. The reason this is mainly being pointed out is for companies that were developing things like face masks and antibacterial gel and saying that it would protect against COVID. You're not allowed to say that because there is not enough evidence to say it's actually protecting against COVID. And you know, even worse, people were saying things like it heals COVID and things like that, or it's the cure for COVID, which is just not true. So it's mainly a warning to say about that, but also then it's kind of just keeping it in mind, because there may be things that you're saying about your products. If you've created something like a new anti-bac hand gel for COVID, you might be saying things on your packaging that you haven't considered to do with the code of conduct of these advertising agencies, and those claims could be uncompliant. So it's basically just kind of saying, be really aware of the code of conduct. The main thing is they want to talk about is not exploiting people's fear of COVID to sell your products. That's the worst thing you can be doing, because obviously, you shouldn't be using people's fear to make sure that you can sell more products. So that's the main thing to kind of be aware of there. So there's more information on their website about that, but it's basically just me flagging up and saying that they are very actively looking at people that are selling products during COVID-19 as well. So we've given the overall picture here of our advertising standards, and I've talked a lot about claim substantiation. So now I want to talk about consumer research, which is what we conduct, Dating Global Research, because this is how we substantiate claims and give you evidence to make sure your claims are compliant globally, or the territories that you're looking to sell your product. So obviously the main point is claim substantiation. I just wanted to cap over some of the other reasons you might conduct consumer research as well, before we move forward with more detail on claim substantiation. So basically, consumer studies are also known as in-home user tests, where you can do market research as well, but mainly we're conducting in-home user tests. And basically they're all to do with perception claims. So you don't necessarily need scientific evidence or instrumental studies to substantiate your claims, but you do always need some kind of evidence to say that the consumers can perceive the effect of the product when they are using it. So that can either be through scientific studies. Generally, if you've got a measurement that you're looking at, you'll be looking at scientific studies. We don't conduct those in-house, but we do have partners who do. So always feel free to come to us with your claims, because we'll be able to tell you what tests you need. But even if you have scientific evidence, you may also need a consumer perception study to say that the consumers can perceive that then with their naked eye. For example, I always talk about anti-aging products, things like wrinkle creams, because often you've got a scientific study which will say how much the wrinkle is reduced by when it's looked at with very in-depth camera. But there's nothing to say that when a consumer then takes that home and uses it as you've asked them to use it on your kind of packaging, that they're actually going to see that effect when they're using the product. And that's what consumer studies are defending against. So it's really valid evidence to have about your product. Like I said, you don't always need that scientific evidence either. So that can be really expensive to do these instrumental studies. And if it's not needed and you can do it with a consumer study as well, you're going to save yourself some time and money. So really important to be aware of what consumer research is. As I just mentioned then, it reflects the actual conditions of the product in use. So when a volunteer uses the product on the test, it's a bit like a consumer picking it up off the shelf. We give them the usage directions that would be on your packaging, so they're using it exactly how you want them to be using it. So it's really important for new product development as well, because it's basically saying, has the user instructions that we've given, everything like that, does that provide the effect that we want? Because if not, we can even review that and make sure to change your usage directions to help complement your product when it's being sold, as well as substantiate your claims. So lots to think about. There's also part of the EU cosmetics regulation, if you're in the EU, which states that you should have some kind of in-home user study to assess the undesirable events of your product. So obviously you need a safety test for every cosmetic product. Again, I'm talking about cosmetics. So if you're not part of the cosmetic industry, it might be interesting anyway. So yeah, carry on. So yes, when the actual volunteers are using the product in the in-home consumer test, there is a certain undesirable event review as well, because you have your safety test, which is when it's applied by a dermatologist and reviewed in a laboratory or in a clinic. But when you have a kind of large scale of people using it as they should be using it again, the actual conditions of use, you may find other undesirable effects come up. So we've got incomplete reporting for that as well. So it's all these kind of reasons, again, for doing consumer research that you may not have considered. Again, things like brand and product and brand perceptions as well. So really important to know how your brand is perceived by people, your product. If you're looking at a global market, is your product being perceived the same way in the UK as it is in China, and again in Germany? Get an idea of those markets, research them. Again, it says that investigating new markets, basically get an idea of that propensity to buy before you launch your product there. Is there anything you need to change about your product before you start launching it? Benchmark testing and reformulation testing, you can compare products and you can see how they perform against each other, whether that's against a competitor or against an old formulation. If you need to change a raw ingredient in your product, is it still accepted as well by your consumers? All of that kind of investigation. You can get testimonials and reviews on your products as well, which you can use in your marketing. So it's a real extra uplift there. You can also get things like photos, videos, everything like that as well. So lots that you can be using extra in your marketing when you're advertising your product. And you can assess things like packaging design and establish your price points. So there's lots of reasons to use consumer research, but today we're going to be talking about claim substantiation because that's what this lecture is focusing on, advertising. So once you have your consumer claims from your study, so you've conducted your consumer study, where can you use these claims? So obviously you can use them anywhere. You can use them, it substantiates your claims full stop. It doesn't matter where that is being used, so you can substantiate it anywhere. So online, things like that. But I just want to give you examples of how it's been used on these platforms, just so you can see how it really escalates the advertising as well. Because obviously if I'm looking at these kind of websites here, I've got these products that I've selected and they have these on their website, all of these claims. So obviously if you have that on your website as well, you're going to sell more products. So it's not just to do with making sure your product is compliant, it's about making it a real success of your advertising campaign. As you see here, there's some incredibly high claims on these products. A consumer is more likely to purchase the products that have these like 100%, 90%, rather than a product that doesn't have any kind of claims on them at all. So really important to think about how you can make your product stand out in this really crowded FMCG market. And a really good way of doing that is by using your consumer study results in your advertising. You can also use it on social media. So I've picked up a couple of our clients' adverts here on their social media to give you an idea of how it's been used. So Skinny Tan have used it on Facebook. They've quoted all of their different really high claims about their product, but they've also got this really big kind of massive claim in the middle, which says 9 out of 10 people said Wonder Serum gave them a more flawless color than other self tanners they've tried. So again, it's just really putting their marketing out there. People are more likely to purchase the products. And Temple Spa have used a claim on their Instagram as well. Again, one of their high claims to say the skin was left out intensely nourished. So it's just really standing out. It's making sure that your adverts are being seen. People are going to trust it more if they can see that data and see how people have agreed with the claim. They're going to be more interested. You also need to use advertising claims on TV. So it's kind of different for every country, but particularly in the UK, which I know a lot of you are based in. You have to show your advertising data on your claim on TV. So you always see it this kind of like lower third where it says how many people agreed with whatever claim they're talking about on the screen. So yeah, you actually need to have that anyway. It's not kind of it does help sell your product, but it's actually a legal requirement. And you need to have it pass over 70% to even be allowed to put your product on TV as well. So it's, again, it's just a really important thing to think about. If you know that you want to market on TV, you know that you need some consumer research, and you need to use those claims on the TV as well. I want to talk about shopping channels as well. So this will be the last kind of platform I kind of go over. So all script on shopping channels must be substantiated. So all of that script they're talking about the whole time must have data behind it to prove that those claims they're making are true. I've brought up QVC as the main one because, as we all know, that is the biggest shopping channel that's out there still. So they've got really clear guidance there about what they need for you to be able to use your product. So again, it's not about just making the most of your advert. It's again going back to that compliance. You're not allowed to advertise on QVC without providing the evidence behind the claims, and they've got some clear stuff there. I'm just going to show you a clip so you can see what that looks like. And you can see kind of how successful it is, you know, to show those claims again while it's hosting on QVC. Sorry, I'm doing the whole changing of my screen share here. Right, it's not that one. You should be able to see this one. Just double check. Yes, that is the right screen. So I'll quickly show you how they're talking about the consumer research results on QVC.
So I know that we did a study, and I would love to share some of the graphics, consumer graphics with you. So just after 1 week, this is measured by an expert grader. This wasn't like we asked the participants. 100% of every single person that used this saw an improvement in smoothness. After 4 weeks, every single person saw an improvement in radiance. We also had people saying there was improvement in skin tone. And now when you keep using it and we get to 8 weeks, we see 95% improvement in appearance of fine lines, 12 weeks, 95% improvement in appearance of pores. Big. So this is just from the serum. That's big. That's that vitamin C you're getting. It's made up of also 10%.
Great, so I hope that all shed well. So yeah, you can see that obviously, you know, they need the results anyway, but it's a really good way to sell the product and kind of give people that are watching the channel some idea of what's been seen, and again, hopefully sell more products on there. So sorry, no, I thought that was the last platform I was going to talk about. I'm going to talk about labels and packaging as well for claims. So obviously it's really important to note that all your claims on your labels and packaging are also an advert. So I took this from ICAS because it's something that wasn't really considered for a long time. It was more looking at those other platforms and saying, do those adverts abide with the code of conduct? But now they're also really thinking about product labels, because obviously there are a lot of claims on your product labels. It's really important you put it on your product labels, because if people don't see those other adverts about your products, then what they are going to see is your product on the shelf or on your website, and see the label, and which is going to have your claims on it as well. So just because it's on a label doesn't mean it's any less of an advertising claim. It still needs to be substantiated. Everything that's on the label needs to be substantiated. And it's not just about those percentage things. It's not about just that percentage claim, say 100% of people agreed. If it says on your mascara that it's long lasting, that needs to be substantiated. Or even if it's a volume mascara, there needs to be evidence to say that participants noticed volume in their lashes. So it's really important to think about every little bit of marketing and description you're putting about your product. It always needs substantiation, always. So for some people like new clients are quite surprised about that and kind of sort of saying, well, it's not going on to an advert anywhere, but obviously if anything said about your product, it needs to make sure it's basically making sure it's not a misleading advert in any way. So now I'm going to talk about some case studies. So we've talked about all those different advertising regulations, talked about what consumer research is and where you can see it. Now, how do we design a study to make sure that you can make those claims about your product? So I've got two case studies I'm going to go through today. As mentioned, this is the kind of global, the global webinar. So I've chose the two cases I'm looking at all of Europe and also looking at all of Asia, because those are the key markets that we were looking at. So the first one I'm talking about is from a leading pharmacy, leading retailer and wholesale pharmacy, health and beauty products. They were looking at testing a day and night cream, and they were looking at doing it in their key markets in Europe, because that's where they were looking at selling their product. The specific product that's where they're looking at advertising it was in their key European markets. So that was Spain, Germany, France, Italy, and Portugal. They also wanted, so basically they want to get the propensity to buy. Is our product going to sell in all of our main EU territories, as well as the claims? And the claims they were looking at for were suitable for all skin types, anti-aging, and that it performed well in a hot climate. So this was tested during the summer in those territories, because that is when it was going to be sold as well. So there's a lot of different SROs involved here. So I've decided to pick one, so I don't go through each single one. But basically what I want to do is kind of show you where it says about evidence and where it says about those consumer research claims within the code of conducts of the different SROs. Because obviously I've said that they have these codes, but what do those codes look like? What kind of information are they putting out there? So the ARPP in France state that a claim is any claim or indication of presentation used for advertising a product. It must be truthful, clear, fair, objective, and not be likely to mislead. So again, it's what I talked about before. Any kind of stuff that's going out advertising the product is a claim. It must be supported by appropriate proofs. So whether that's a consumer study or instrumental study. I also wanted to talk about the before and after photos as well, because there's some information on that one. And as mentioned, they're a really good way to support your evidence. So in France in particular, obviously the visual photos need to be clear of the performance. So they need to be very clear. Like, for example, if you're looking at anti-wrinkle cream, you don't want your people wearing any makeup or anything like that. But it needs to be representative of the tested sample. So it needs to be on a study. You can't kind of just sort of say, oh, we're going to test one person, they're going to use our product, they're going to have before and after photos, we're going to use that in our advertising. You need to do a study to get the before and after photos, because you need to have the data to back up what the before and after photos are saying. And you can't kind of use someone that had amazing skin before and kind of, carry on and say that they're the person you're going to choose. It has to be representative of the sample. So any before and after photos you're using have to kind of reflect all of the before and after photos and all of those tested subjects. So I want to bring that one up as well, because I don't often talk about before and after photos. But again, it's something really important to think about with testing. So what was the study design for this one? So again, we're looking at those main territories: Spain, Germany, France, Italy, and Portugal. So we had to conduct it in those languages. It's a regime with two products, because we've got a day and night cream. So this means that we're looking at those combined claims about how the day and night cream works together. It's a 6-week study. It's quite common for an anti-aging product to be about 6 weeks or 8 weeks, to make sure that we can really see the effect, the difference in the skin. It had to be for all skin types again, so we want to get that claim, which meant we chose 25% of people with sensitive skin, because we wanted to have a really large portion of the people that we're testing on with that skin type to ensure it's suitable for sensitive skin, as this is this way you see the most irritations. So generally it's really important to make sure you've got a really good representative panel of sensitive skin if you want to make sure it's suitable for sensitive skin as well. We did skin phototypes because obviously we're testing it in the summer, so we need to make sure we're using the right kind of phototypes for the skin. The propensity for the skin to burn, it needs to be the correct kind of phototype. So generally we're looking at Caucasian skin types, because these are the kind of skin types that are most common in those European territories. The age is 25 to 55, so general kind of age bracket for people that would have aging things they want, aging concerns on their skin. But we wanted them to be non-users of anti-aging products, because we didn't want them to compare it to the usual brand. We wanted them to test it fresh and kind of get their opinion on the anti-aging benefits. So what were the results? So this has been lifted straight from our report. So I just selected a few questions from the study to give you an example. So when we have our reports, all of our reports are in real time. What that means is you can log in at any point and you can view your results. So even if you've got a 1-week questionnaire, 2-week questionnaire, 3-week, 4-week, 5-week, 6-week questionnaire, you can log on every week and see those results as they're coming in. It also means that you haven't got to wait for us to produce a final report at the end of the study. So once you get to that 6-week point, in this case, you haven't got to say, okay, we now need to wait 2 weeks for atypical research to get all the information together and provide us with a final report. As soon as the minimum amount of responses we need comes in, you'll be able to log in and see that report straight away, because obviously it's just waiting for those participants to answer the questionnaire. There's nothing else to wait for. So then you get a breakdown of all your different questions and all the statistical analysis that's relevant to the question breakdown. But this is the most important table when we're looking at claims, because we're simply seeing how many people have agreed with those claims, so we can use that in our marketing. So we've got the questions on the left-hand side. We've got the number of participants who said they were satisfied, were satisfied with the claim. The amount of people that were neutral. In this case, we didn't have any neutrals. The number of people that were not satisfied, and then we have the percentages of satisfied, neutral, and not satisfied. As you can see, this is a large study because, like I said, we wanted to reflect the different markets. So we had to have a substantial number of participants in each market. But we can look at the overall data as well, and you can use that for your claims, and you can use that for your advertising. There's no reason you can't. You can look at the overall claims. It's just very important, if you're going to use it in your overall claims, in your global marketing, obviously each territory needs to have individually passed the claim as well. So you couldn't sort of say, okay, we're going to say 98% of people said it reduces the wrinkles, but actually in France they said 60% of people agreed with it. They all have to have matched the pass rate. Usually we talk about a 66% pass rate because it's a statistical majority. But a lot of people like a 70% pass rate as well, because mentioned, if you want to advertise on things like TV and other certain marketing platforms, you may need to have at least a 70% pass rate. So we can set that all for you, and that's why you've got little asterisk next to some of those claims, well, all of those claims, sorry, because they've all gone over the pass rate. So it's really easy to look at your data. Also, what's really good about this massive panel, as discussed, we want to get that all skin types claims. So obviously, if people are agreeing with every claim, we know we've got 25% of them are sensitive skin. We're really happy about the amount of irritations that have been reported and things like that to say that it is suitable for sensitive skin. So what were the claims that we looked at for this particular study? Like I said, I've just selected a few from their report to give you an idea. So things like my skin is protected from redness and flushing associated with the heat. Like I said, we wanted to make sure it was good for a hot climate. The serums are suitable to use in the summer. They reduce the appearance of wrinkles. My skin feels boosted with vitality, all those anti-aging claims. And you can see there's some fantastically high claims on this product. So it's really going to help them with their marketing. The next study I want to talk about is a beauty brand that are launching a product into Asia. So this is, they're expanding their market, particularly with reference to Asia. It's an anti-aging facial serum. They want to make sure that they're meeting up with the advertising standards within all their key Asian markets. They want to substantiate the most effective claims in those markets. And in particular, they're looking at smoother, firmer, and hydrated skin. So as mentioned, if we're not going to sort of test in every single country in Asia to get those the claims that it's suitable to use there, but we are going to test in specific Asian territories to make sure that these claims are substantiated. So I believe this one, I think I'll bring it up in a minute, but I believe in this one we did it in Korea, Japan, and China, but I think that'll be on the next slide. Again, I just want to show you some legislation. So in this case, I just chose Japan as one of the countries I've selected. So the Code of Conduct in Japan says, sorry, let me start again. There's 2 acts that the Japan Advertising Review Organization, so that's the SRO in Japan, and there are 2 acts that they follow, basically, 2 kind of laws there. And the core principle is to prohibit non-factual expressions in advertisements. Again, we're looking at having evidence behind the claims for any adverts that are in Japan. So yes, as mentioned, the different languages we're looking at English, Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. And the English is because we tested this in Hong Kong as well. So some of the participants we have in Hong Kong are English speakers, so they can select which language they want to see their results in, or they want to see their questionnaires in. So again, it kind of gives a reflection of the key Asian markets there, and that's where we're looking at testing. A single placement study this time because we're just investigating one product on its own. It's a 4-week study. We needed to have all skin types again. We had to show multiple signs of aging, and we really wanted to specify what those signs of aging were so we could see what the improvement was. So that's deep set lines, a loss of luminosity and radiance, a skin lacking in hydration. Again, it needed to be national if marketing data was to be reliable. So basically we're saying we're not kind of just choosing specific places in these territories to test within. It's a national, so it's all of Korea is invited, all of Japan, all of China, all of Hong Kong. So what were the results? So again, we've got this table. Again, I've selected a few different claims for you to have a look at there. So again, these are really high claims on this product. So the product didn't feel greasy on the skin. The product was left feeling intensely hydrated with 90%. The product left my skin feeling soft and smooth, 93%, and the product left my skin feeling firm at 88%. So again, we can use those in the marketing, but we also know that those claims substantiated in those key territories. So I want to quickly talk about some removed adverts. So obviously I've talked about what the best practice is, you know, how you get your advertising claims, how you get that evidence. But I also want to talk a little bit about bad practice. When I talk about bad practice, I'm not saying that these companies have gone out and said, you know, we're going to mislead our consumers, we're going to say it's about our product. There probably just isn't the right kind of evidence provided. So I'll talk through the kind of examples. So Clearasil, this one's really important because the claims were substantiated, but they were medicinal claims and not cosmetic claims. So I didn't talk about this one too much, but when you're looking at claims and looking at your advertising globally, be very aware of the product category for the claim that you're, for the product that you are selling. So for example, I'm going to talk about sunscreen. I like to talk about sunscreen when we talk about product categories, because in the EU it's a cosmetic, in the USA it's an over-the-counter OTC product, and in Australia it's a therapeutic good. So we've got 3 different product categories, which means there are 3 different rules to be looking at in terms of what claims you're allowed to make about products in that category. So obviously you can't make medicinal claims about sunscreen in the EU, but then there are kind of medicinal claims you can make in the USA. So really important to be aware of the kind of about the product category essentially. As mentioned with Clearasil, these were medicinal claims that were made, so they had evidence about their product, but they were medicinal and not cosmetic. Pantene had a claim about make hair up to 10 times stronger, but they found that it was not substantiated, and there was no kind of there was no consumer studies to sort of say about how the product worked anyway. They didn't have the right evidence. And in L'Oreal, they had false advertising claims about one of their products out there. I think, I can't find, I haven't put the actual claim in there. It was something to do with like baby soft skin, but yeah, they didn't have substantiation that was appropriate for the claims they were making. So it's just really important to kind of put out there, because again, these are all, as you can see, news articles. So this is bad press that you can get about your product. If you don't have the right evidence to substantiate your claims, these advertising agencies will make it, will release that information, and news agencies can take that off and talk about it. So it's really, really important. Again, you don't want to get that bad press. You need to have that claim substantiation, because this is kind of how your claims could be publicized, which you don't really want, because like I said, probably in these cases they probably had evidence for these claims, but it just wasn't satisfactory evidence, and then they've got the bad press from that anyway. So once you have all of your evidence, it needs to go to your product information file. So as you know, if you're if you kind of work in that kind of department, you will have a product information file about your product, which contains all of the INCI list and everything like that, and all of your safety testing. But it needs to also have all of your claim substantiation data as well. So when you go to your RP, they've got that all together. It also needs to contain any undesirable effects that have been reported as a result of the consumer study. So yeah, that's kind of how you file it. I just want to quickly talk about ACE Global Research, because as mentioned, I've talked about what we do a lot, but I haven't talked about, you know, why you should choose us as a consumer research provider. So we're an award-winning research company. We've won International Business of the Year, we've won Family Business of the Year, we've won internship awards as well. So we're very, very proud of being an award-winning agency. Hopefully we'll get some more awards this year as well. Applications are going in. We're fully compliant with the GDPR and all other kind of data protection regulations globally. As mentioned, you know, we're completely global. It's really important if you've got those cross-territory studies that you know you've got the right data protection across the globe. So we have our own data protection officer in-house. It's really important, not just for our consumers, making sure that their data is anonymous when they're putting in their questionnaires, but it's also really important for you to know that all of your data that you're holding with us is protected. We have undesirable event reporting, as I've mentioned a few times. It's all in real time. So when you've got those real-time reports for your product, you also get real-time reports for any undesirable events that are reported throughout the study. And that's all done in accordance with the Cosmetic Vigilance Act. We can make bespoke undesirable events reports as well. So yeah, it's all things to consider with that. We've got full product liability insurance for every market that we test in across the globe. Really important to protect us and also you. So if there's any kind of any issue, any undesirable event that comes as a result of the study, you know that we're protected. We've never had a serious undesirable event that means we've had to resort to our public liability insurance to give you that peace of mind. But it's just letting you know that obviously you're going to be completely insured if you use us. So that's really important as well. You also need to let your product liability insurance provider know that you're conducting consumer research and that we have product liability insurance. We've got an ISO 27001, which was to do with the GDPR, but we've also got an ISO 9001, which is to do with our quality assurance. We are a partner to the Market Research Society, which means that we follow their code of conduct and, you know, our research is ethical. We also operate by ESOMAR standards. So these are all market research standards that we make sure we're operating by. We can provide regulatory advice. As mentioned, that is what I'm here for as a regulatory specialist. So always feel free to seek regulatory advice from us. And you always get your own designated study manager. So as I mentioned, that's what I did before when I first started at Global Research. So you get a study manager who learns everything about your brand and your products and how you need to conduct your research, and every bit of every study that you conduct with us is made in accordance to that. They really get to know your kind of brand. And they're also there on, you know, for any kind of queries that you need. So that's just a little bit about us. Further advice for consumer studies, we've got I always recommend a panel size starting 100 responses. It gives you really good valid data for, you know, robust data for the claims that you're making. It may need to be more, it may be less, depending on the claims. I can always help with advice there. As mentioned, you know, with the studies that I talked about today, the case studies, obviously they were more than 100 because we're looking at all these different territories. So it's really important. But it kind of just gives you guys a guidance when you're thinking, I need to do a consumer study. Where should I kind of start? How many responses should I get? Always think about 100. I've talked about product liability insurance. All products need to be safety tested. I think that's a given, but obviously they need to be safety tested to the point where they could be released on the market, because we're putting them in the hands of our consumers. They're not coming to a clinic. They're not having someone apply the product on them. So they need to be fully safety tested before they come to us. Your sample should always be debranded. So when you're conducting a study for claims substantiation, we don't want to have any branding on there because we don't want the study to be biased in any way. Always ensure your questionnaire design supports your claims. We can offer questionnaire design as part of our service as well, or we can review any questionnaires that you make and make sure that they are up to standard. And again, just always feel free to seek advice from us. That is what we're here for. So thank you very much for listening so far. I hope that's all been okay. I don't know if anyone's got any questions, but we're opening up the Q&A now. So if there's any questions you've got, feel free to type them in and I will do my best to answer them. I'll leave it open for a few minutes there. Also feel free to email me. Like I said, I'm going to be emailing the webinar recording as well as some other video clips. So if you've got any questions and you can't think of them right now, but you want to ask them later on, you feel free to reply to me on email, and I'll be able to answer those questions for you. So I'll just leave this for a couple of seconds and see if anyone's got any questions come in. I can't see any questions coming in. I don't want to hold you all up. So like I said, feel free to email me. So just to finish off, we are part of the Society of Cosmetic Scientists. Our founder and managing director, Susan Ayton, has recently joined the council for the Southwest. So we're really happy about that. As part of the our kind of involvement with the SCS, we want to promote their distance learning course. So this is a recognised course in the essentials of cosmetic science, and you can do that from anywhere in the world. So if you're thinking about kind of expanding some knowledge on cosmetic science and maybe getting a recognised diploma, yeah, you can have a little look on their website there. And have a little look at their distance learning course. There's also the IFSCC Congress, which will be happening in September in 2022. So you can register your interest for that now. Hopefully that will all be going ahead, because that's quite a way in the future. And then there's just the contact information for us. So as mentioned, feel free to reach out to me directly, replying to my emails if you've got any questions at all. I hope that's been really insightful for you today. As mentioned, it's a lot of information, I know. It's always really hard to talk about these kind of broad overviews. There are other webinars I've conducted that are territory specific. So there's Asia, USA, Europe. Feel free to reach out if you want the recordings for those. They're also posted on our company LinkedIn page, so feel free to have a look on there. If you've got any feedback for any webinars that you would like to see, if there's any subjects or territories that you haven't seen yet and you'd like to see, please let me know, and I can look at creating a more bespoke webinar. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a great day.